观众朋友们，下午好！今天是2月7号，星期四。您现在收看的是今日华尔街，我是蒋洋洋，在纽约为您播报。中美贸易战目前已经持续了将近1年，双方的贸易谈判也进入了白热化的阶段。如果美中两国在3月1日之前未就贸易争端取得突破的话，美国计划将把2500亿美元中国商品的关税上涨至 25%。联合国贸易和发展会议 UNCTAD 周一发布的一份报告显示，美国下月提高对华关税的计划可能引发经济下滑和贸易转移。贸易战对两国经济的影响到底有多少？对全球经济又有什么影响呢？另外，报告指出，在受影响的2500亿美元的中国出口产品中，约 82% 将被其他国家的企业占据，美国企业将得到 6%。中国企业将保留 12%， 欧盟的出口增幅会最大，将从中收获700亿美元。日本、墨西哥和加拿大将各获超过200亿美元。看起来中国和美国是两败俱伤，那贸易战又有什么必要性呢？针对贸易战的核心，强制技术转移真的能够有效的解决吗？基于以上的这一些问题，我们今天非常有幸的请到了 David Lindauer，发展经济学家，威尔斯利大学经济学教授，我们来听听他怎么说。
The United States has very good employment numbers right now. During the State of the Union address, the president said, "We have the lowest unemployment rate we've had in 50 years," a statement which I believe is true. But the tariffs on Chinese goods have nothing to do with those employment numbers. The United States had very high unemployment following the financial crisis and the Great Recession back in 2009, and unemployment had reached 10%. And ever since then, and that's 10 years ago, employment has been growing steadily. It's been one of the longest economic expansions in U.S. history. And it's many other factors that have been led to that growth in employment. And for the economy as a whole, the tariffs had virtually no impact on the aggregate level of unemployment and the aggregate number of jobs. There probably are some workers, a few workers out there who have benefited from the tariff, and there have been others who've been hurt by it. But in terms of the aggregate picture, the tariff is not very important. And certainly I don't think that U.S. farmers have benefited, because certainly soybean farmers have been hurt quite a lot because of the retaliation by the Chinese on soybeans and putting a tariff and the Chinese shifting their purchases to Brazil. So I don't think agriculture in the United States has benefited. And as far as workers are concerned, most American workers in terms of their jobs are not affected by the tariff at all. I think something that isn't sufficiently appreciated is that Chinese imports into the U.S. economy represent a very, very small percentage of the U.S. economy. So I think if one looked up the numbers, the total value of imports from China to the U.S. would represent 3 to 4% of U.S. GDP. And that's just way too small a number to have a big impact on employment overall. So the fact that wages have modestly increased on average for American workers has much, much more to do with macroeconomic policy, what the Federal Reserve has done, with the general growth, overall growth in the economy, and what's happening because of Chinese imports, which again are a relatively small percentage of a big economy. It will affect some individuals, but it hasn't had an aggregate effect that would show up on all workers. Let's talk about the UN report first, and about the fact that some of the biggest beneficiaries of the U.S.-China trade war are not in China and not in the United States, but are in other countries. So by putting a tax, which is all a tariff is, on Chinese goods and making them more expensive, this has encouraged U.S. firms to find other sources of supplies for different products, intermediate goods, final goods, whatever. So they're now firms in India and firms in Vietnam and probably firms in Mexico and in other places as well who get to send, who are exporting to the United States and replacing the goods the Chinese had exported previously. But what's important to realize about that is before the tariffs, U.S. firms would have had the opportunity to buy those goods from India or Vietnam or Europe or whatever country, but chose not to. And the reason that firms didn't source from those other countries is because the goods were more expensive. So what we see happening is that U.S. dollars don't go as far any further because we're spending more on those imports than we did previously. And that hurts the overall U.S. economy. That means that some goods cost more money because we're now getting imports from other countries that are selling them at a higher price than we could have gotten them from China if not for the tariffs. And so household budgets don't go quite as far as they did previously. So I think it would be a mistake to say that it just doesn't matter because the U.S. is just importing from other countries rather than China. By importing from other places, it's more expensive, and if it's more expensive, that means our dollars and our households cannot consume as much as they would have been able to if the tariffs had never been imposed. So that's in relationship to your question about the UN report. In terms of does it make any sense to have this trade war with the Chinese? Well, the administration has 2 points of view, as I think you're aware. One is the president, for some reason, is very concerned about bilateral trade deficits. This is something most economists don't think is an important focus of policy attention at all, but the president, for some reason, thinks it's important. And he's thought it's important for much of his life. In the 1980s, there are quotes one can find where he railed against the huge trade deficit the United States had with Japan. And so that's going back 40 years. He was saying these things. So he has this fixation on bilateral trade deficits, which is not grounded in good economic reasoning. Then someone like the U.S. Negotiator in this, Robert Lighthizer, his view is that we've had problems with technology transfer and theft of intellectual property, and we've had these issues with China for many, many decades across many administrations, and other attempts to rectify this problem haven't resulted in a good outcome. And so now we're going to try using tariffs in order to somehow or other come up with an agreement to reduce that amount of piracy of intellectual property and perhaps to reduce the amount of technology transfers that U.S. firms are feeling unhappy about. Whether or not using tariffs as a means of resolving that issue is a good idea, I think is subject to some debate.
Sure. So the Chinese economy is slowing down recently. And in the State of the Union speech, Trump talked about the structural change. Is that realistic? What kind of impact will the structural reforms have on the Chinese economy?
I'm certainly not an expert on the Chinese economy, and so I would be very hesitant to talk about all of the reasons that contribute to a slowdown in Chinese economic growth. It's also very important to keep in mind that a growth rate of over 6% is more rapid than the overwhelming majority of countries in the world. So for China to be growing at 6 or 6.5%, I'm not sure what the number is right now, it seems slow relative to previous years, but it's still an incredibly rapid rate of growth. Obviously, it's more than double the rate of growth of the U.S. economy. I think one of the fundamental factors that's leading to a slowdown in China's economic growth is that China's economic growth eventually has to slow down. It can't keep up the pace of the past few decades. We've seen that in other newly emerging economies. The Korean economy used to grow very fast. It doesn't anymore. Going further back in history, one would observe the same thing in Japan. If one looked at Singapore, one would find the same thing. Thailand, a bunch of other successful economies, that there comes a point that they grow very quickly and then they have to grow more slowly. And they grow more slowly as they get closer and closer to the technological frontier. No fully advanced economy like the United States or Germany or France or Japan today ever grows in a sustained way by more than 3% a year, and 3% is very enviable. And so China is slowly heading in that direction. But there are other factors having to do with your banking sector, with the state-owned enterprises. There are other factors involved as well. But I don't feel I have the expertise to comment on the precise reasons why the growth rate in China today is where it's at, which again is still enviable but lower than it may have been in recent years. I think the impact it has on the global economy is that it's creating a lot of uncertainty. And uncertainty is one of the things that really harms investment. Business people kind of like to understand the rules of the game they're going to face. They like to, making investments is always a risky proposition. And if you layer on top of that political actions, trade wars, tariffs, and other kinds of trade restraints, it makes decisions about where to invest, what supply chains to rely upon, much more uncertain. And all of those things, I think, are very harmful to the global economy. The magazine The Economist, its front cover, referred to that we're entering a period where we're transitioning from an era of globalization to an era of slowbization, where the word slow replaces the word global. And the idea here is that all of a sudden firms are much more uncertain, much more nervous, see much more risk in extending supply chains around the globe. And what's concerning about this is that the globalization of the last 30 to 40 years has been very beneficial to many, many economies, especially the economies of East Asia, but also to the U.S. economy. U.S. consumers have benefited tremendously from trade with East Asia. And we're now, it feels like we're abandoning that strategy for something else. And it's not obvious if that's going to be to the detriment of the global economy or if it's going to lead to improvements. I think by making the investment environment more risky because of political actions, policy decisions by governments, that's not a good thing for the growth of the global economy. And we'll have to see in the years ahead if this continues or if it reverses itself. If you look at the U.S. economy and the history of the U.S. economy, we have patent laws, we have copyright laws, and we put these in place because we thought they were a good idea, that we thought that for the domestic economy, it was a good idea that people had some protection. If they invented something, they could reap the benefits of having made the investments for that invention. And I think there's an element to which there's a feeling that maybe we need to have more intellectual property right protections, more copyright protections, more patent protections for the global economy, just as we created them for the domestic economy. But how you go about doing that, how you go about enforcing that, those are very, very complicated questions. But if you think about the real source of technological innovation in the world today, it is all the scientists and the trained people, whether they are Chinese or Indian, American, French, whatever. And we have tremendous investments in scientific research and engineers and talented people all over the planet. And those people are going to be engaging in research and innovation, and there are more of them, so I suspect we're going to have more innovation. So I think the core of what drives innovation is the people you have available to do the innovation and the incentives to do them. And I think the incentives remain strong. The human capital base for making those innovations is extensive. So I think that, again, at the aggregate scale, is innovation going to be a function of this trade dispute between the United States and China? Again, maybe on some small margin in some small sectors, but I think overall, my grandchildren and your children are going to live in a much more sophisticated technological world, and that will not be derailed by the current problem. Over the last 30 years, as we've built up a multilateral trading system, and that today includes the World Trade Organization, the nations of the world came together and formed international agreements and international institutions to deal with trade disputes. And I think that those organizations had a lot of success. They're not perfect. There are problems with the WTO, but overall, it's really remarkable to see the extent to which international trade grew. And some of the reason for that was we had these multilateral organizations. The WTO actually has a provision to handle disputes over intellectual property. Now, I don't think it's been tremendously successful to date in resolving some of those issues, but it might have been a better strategy to try to use the World Trade Organization for the United States to join with other countries that are concerned with intellectual property issues that arise in dealings with China, and to use a multilateral organization, a multilateral institution, to try to resolve these things rather than a trade war. I think the other thing that I think an opportunity that this administration, this U.S. administration, lost was the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was one of the first things that President Trump killed when he took office, had tremendous potential to resolve some of the intellectual property disagreements between the United States and China. And the reason the TPP had that potential was not because China was a member of TPP. It wasn't. It was going to be many of the surrounding nations in East Asia, the United States, Canada, Mexico, and some countries in Latin America as well. And if the TPP had come into existence with the United States as a member, and it included in TPP were a number of provisions concerning intellectual property and copyrights and things of that nature, it would have basically laid the groundwork for negotiations for China to one day become part of TPP. So that it might have been that the Trans-Pacific Partnership would have been kind of a new WTO of the future in the years ahead with China as a member. So that I think there was the potential for multilateral organizations and negotiations to resolve some of the issues that we're facing. And perhaps there might have also been the potential for bilateral discussions, bilateral diplomacy between the United States and China. We, after all, share some common interests. We share some conflicting interests. And a more diplomatic approach to sit down at the table to discuss these things without the use of tariffs might have been successful. But that's a counterfactual that we can't observe, so I could be mistaken about how successful that might be. is a very specific trade dispute that the United States had with China during the administration of Barack Obama. So it was very early in President Obama's first term that he used his executive powers to put a temporary tariff on imports of automobile and light truck tires from China. And the tariff was about, I think it was about 35% the first year, and it was going to last 3 years and go down from that 35% level each year by a little bit. And this has been a very studied case of U.S. trade protection against China. And when people have studied this, the real consequences of this were, number one, that instead of importing automobile tires from China, we got them instead from Mexico, Thailand, India, from other countries, what we were talking about earlier. The second thing that the studies have found is that about 1,200 jobs in the United States were saved as a result of this trade protection, as a result of this tariff. But at the same time, American consumers were forced to pay more for automobile tires because they used to come in more cheaply from China, and now they were more expensive because of the tariff. And the tires coming in from India and Thailand and Mexico were more expensive. That's why they hadn't been able to compete previously. So I think the estimates are that American consumers spent about $1 billion more a year in order to buy tires for their automobiles. So what we have is that the people in the United States, the workers who benefited were these 1,200 workers who worked in a number of U.S. tire factories in a few places in the country. But because consumers spent $1 billion more on tires, that means they spent $1 billion less on something else. But we don't know what they spent less on, and it wasn't all in one place. It was spread throughout the whole economy. Maybe some people didn't, go to the mall as often and bought less clothing, or went out to eat less often, or didn't get their kids' teeth cleaned. We have no idea, but we do know that $1 billion less was spent. And there have been estimates that $1 billion would have translated to the jobs of 3,500 workers in the U.S. retail sector. So that as a result of the tariff on Chinese goods, we helped 1,200 workers in the tire industry, but hurt 3,500 jobs in the retail sector. And that doesn't sound like a really good strategy to help American workers. And I think that story about one particular product, one particular tariff episode that occurred long before Donald Trump became president, is very telling about how costly tariffs are to the domestic economy. And you better be very, very hopeful that you're going to get something really good in return if you enter into a trade war with another country, because while you're in that war, your own people are suffering, not just your trading partner.
而最新的消息是，据 CNBC 报道，白宫高级政府官员说，川普与习近平会谈很大不可能在3月1日之前举行，这是两国达成贸易协议的最后期限。虽然两国领导人仍然有望会见，且可能会在3月1日截止期之后不久见面，但目前还有太多的工作要做，而所剩形成协议的时间已经不多了。文章指出，川普还需要准备在2月底与朝鲜的金正恩举行非常重要的会议。白宫官员建议不要把中国和朝鲜两个问题混淆在一起，尽管中国邀请习近平和川普在川金峰会之后立即会面。要求匿名的高级政府官员说，目前情况还有不确定性，川习是否如期会面可能会在贸易代表团下周前往北京之后发生变化。美国总统川普6号下午宣布提名财政部负责国际事务的副部长大卫·马尔帕斯出任世界银行行长一职。 川普称：“我确信没有比大卫更好的候选人来领导世界银行了。”马尔帕斯在白宫接受提名时表示：“我非常乐观地认为我们可以取得突破，在海外创造增长，帮助我们抗击极端的贫困，增加发展中国家的经济机遇。”原世行行长金庸在第2个任期结束之前提前3年辞职，并转投一家私募股权基金之后，世行行长职位就处于空缺的状态。金庸今年1月初提出辞职，将在2月1日卸任。出生在韩国的金庸是首位有第一线扶贫经历，也是第一位没有政治或者金融背景的世行行长。金庸将加入一家参与发展中国家基础设施投资的公司。传统上，世行行长由美国提名，这也是一项不成文的规定。国际货币基金组织 IMF 由一名欧洲人领导，亚洲开发银行由一名日本人领导。现年62岁的马尔帕斯出生于密歇根北部，他在科罗拉多大学获得物理学学士学位，在丹佛大学获得 MBA 学位。他曾在乔治城大学外交学院学习国际经济学。他会讲西班牙语、俄语和法语。1977年到1983年，他在俄勒冈州波特兰市为 ESCO 公司和 Arthur Andersen 集团做咨询工作，在那里他成为了注册会计师。马尔帕斯现任主管国际事务的美国财政部次长，世界银行的行长一向由美国人担任，马尔帕斯还需经过世行的理事会批准才能正式上任。但是川普选择由他来领导世行，可能会引来得到贫穷国家支持的对立候选人。贫穷国家是世行资金的首要受益者。马尔帕斯去年曾帮助推动为世行增加了130亿美元的资金，但是他曾经抨击世行继续向中国贷款。中国是仅次于美国的世界第2大经济体。他说，北京不再需要世行的支持了。自从中国1980年加入世行以来，得到了总计将近620亿美元的发展贷款。马尔帕斯在外交关系协会2017年主办的一次研讨会上说，世界银行的最大借方是中国，可是中国有很多的资源。马尔帕斯是川普的忠诚支持者，和总统类似，他也说，多边主义走得实在太远了。多边架构下的这些国际协议基本上一直被描述为2战结束70年来所产生的由各个机构和协议组成的自由世界秩序的一部分。川普政府退出了12国跨太平洋伙伴关系协定、巴黎气候变化协议以及限制伊朗核武器项目的协议。今年62岁的马尔帕斯是川普政府与中国谈判新贸易协议的团队成员。他说，反对多边主义有时被错误地贴上民粹主义的标签，但我认为它是务实和现实的反应，针对的是那种经常偏离了我们有关有限政府、自由与法治价值观的多边体系。在川普星期3正式宣布提名马尔帕斯领导世界银行之前，有关消息就已经透露出来。这一项提名已经受到一些密切关注世行政策和贷款做法人士的反对。前利比里亚公共工程部长盖德摩尔在发展中国家事务上有着丰富的阅历。他说，一个不可救药的纵火犯要当消防局局长了。一位在其成年生涯中一直在诋毁多边主义的人物，如今有幸管理其中一个支柱了，这又会怎样的结局呢？而据 NPR 报道，致力于扶贫和发展的研究组织全球发展中心的经济师贾丁斯·桑德福形容说，马尔帕斯是川普的铁杆，在范围广泛的议题上犯有经济失职行为，包括对2008年金融危机的初始迹象置若罔闻，还扬言废除另一个总部在华盛顿的全球金融机构国际货币基金组织。桑德福称，马尔帕斯对世界银行抗击全球贫困的使命的蔑视，比得上川普的国家安全顾问约翰·博尔顿对联合国的蔑视，根本就不应该让他来领导世行。他说，现在的问题是在世行理事会有代表的其他国家是否会让川普政府破坏一个关键的全球机构。他们有个选择，这是简单多数投票制，美国在选举中没有否决权，而更好的候选人有很多。 在推选世行行长的过程中，美国控制着大约16%的投票权。不过，欧洲国家加在一起投票权重更大。然而，按照传统，欧洲人一直被提名担任国际货币基金组织总裁。目前的总裁是前法国财政部长拉加德。但是目前还没有出现其他领导世行的替代人选。不过，一个可能人选是前尼日利亚外交和财政部长恩戈齐。2012年，他曾经在南非、尼日利亚和其他非洲政府支持下竞选世行行长，他输给了韩裔美国人金庸。医生和人类学出身的金庸当时得到了美国的普遍支持，但是恩戈齐已表示，如果得到世行一名理事的提名，他将再次竞选。其他发展中国家的候选人可能会包括拉古拉姆·拉詹。他曾经任国际货币基金组织首席经济师和印度中央银行行长。10多年来，拉詹一直呼吁让美国以外的人来领导世行。另一位可能的候选人是非洲开发银行行长阿金武米·阿迪西纳。